Next up in our hero spotlight journey, we have Ms. Marvel Kamala Khan. So we just got finished playing 4 different games with Ms. Marvel, one with each one of the 4 different aspects, and now we are going to talk about her, talk about her strengths, what kind of cards she likes, rank her aspects in terms of which one she's best in, and then put her into our overall ranking of Marvel Champions heroes. Kamala Khan was in the first wave of Marvel Champions heroes. She has a really high recovery on her alter ego side of 5 and a standard hand size of 6. Her team spirit allows you to discard cards from the top of your deck until you discard a Ms. Marvel card, and you can add that into your hand. So if you want to go through your deck fairly quickly, then you can effectively have a hand size of 7 in alter ego. This does set up some pretty cool combos. Once you flip that card over, Ms. Marvel has arguably one of the worst stat lines in the game. It could be argued that Hulk may have a worse one because of the 0 thwart, and we're not counting Quicksilver because he is Quicksilver. Ms. Marvel has an incredible ability. Her Morphogenics ability allows you to exhaust her after you play either an attack, thwart, or defense event to return that card to your hand. So this can set up some incredible combos, either taking it back so that you can use it for money, or you can replay that event multiple times. The flexibility that this allows you to implement into this game makes her a super fun and super versatile hero. Ms. Marvel has a really strong alter ego kit. She has 3 persona supports, first one being Bruno Corelli, and he allows you to exhaust him while you're in alter ego, and then you can place a card under him. Later, even in hero form, you can exhaust Bruno to then take up to 3 of the cards that you have previously stored under Bruno and add them into your hand. This can allow for some very explosive turns and sway the tide of the battle very easily. Amir Khan allows you to place a card from your discard pile on your bottom of your draw deck, and then you get to draw a card. This is actually my favorite persona support because it allows you to basically set your last hand through your deck and put cards there for what situation you're currently in. And you can make that decision based on how thin your deck is. If you know you're going to be drawing it in the next turn or 2, then that changes. Then, okay, I'm going to need this high damage card probably once I've decked out once, and then I'll have it in my hand. It's a guarantee. It also just replaces himself. So with Amir, with Team Spirit, at that point you're up to like 8 cards in your hand, which can get incredibly powerful. Throw Bruno on top of that, that's like 11 cards rolling into hero form, and there's not a lot that you can't do with 11 cards. The last persona support she has is Nakia Badir. Her ability states that in alter ego form you can exhaust her to have the next card that you play be at -1 cost. This is a really nice card, and you can actually use it after you flipped up to hero because it's the next card you play this phase, and so it doesn't have any restrictions on playing only alter ego cards, which is really good. She's the least flashy, still really good, but least flashy of these persona supports, so it's nice to have. She does want to be rolling down so that she can take advantage of these 3 alter ego as well as some of the other abilities that she has in her kit, and then it also very much influences her deck building. So Ms. Marvel continues to get better, and this is something that I have said multiple times in other videos, and Ms. Marvel continues to rise in the power rankings, and that's because of 2 cards in her kit. They're both upgrades. They're Embiggen and Shrink. So Embiggen says that you can exhaust Embiggen, and then the attack that an attack event that you have played, you increase the damage output of that by 2, and Shrink is the same but for thwart, so you increase the threat removal by 2. This is for every instance of damage or threat removal, and so if you have cards that do multiple instances of damage or multiple instances of threat removal, it does influence both of those numbers. As we get more cards throughout the game's release, Ms. Marvel continues to grow and get better in these power rankings. The last card that I wanted to talk about before we kind of move into cards outside of her kit cards, I wanted to talk about Wiggle Room. Wiggle Room is one of my favorite cards in the game. It's a 0 cost defense event that says that whenever you take any amount of damage, you can play Wiggle Room, you negate 3 of that damage and draw a card. But because of her Morphogenics ability, you can exhaust Ms. Marvel and pull that back. You are still in the same response window, so you can then play Wiggle Room again. So if you take an attack of 6, play Wiggle Room, negate 3, exhaust Ms. Marvel, pull Wiggle Room back, play it again. So this prevents 6 damage and allows you to get some more card draws, And it's just an excellent card. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to protection, but even outside of the protection build, it's a phenomenal card. So let's dive into some of the cards that she likes that I like to look to add to any of my decks. They're not necessarily aspect locked, and so these are some that I kind of look to build into any of the 4 aspects. And so let's dive into some of the alter ego cards. So because she likes to be in alter ego, because she has the 3 really incredible persona supports, we can build decks that like to play into that strength. So one of the ways that we can do that is adding these training cards, which I didn't utilize in my playthroughs, and I probably should have. I wish I had done at least one game where I utilized some of these. I'm thinking like assault training or defense training. These are alter ego actions where you can exhaust them and shuffle an aspect card back into your deck, and this helps. It does kind of mess with a mirror a little bit because you are shuffling your deck, so you don't get to plan as well, but it is a nice way to kind of set up and plan for your next turn. And because she is rolling down to get the utilization out of those, you can utilize just packing the cards that you really do need in there. Some other cards that she likes to use for the alter ego is Crew Quarter. She has an excellent recovery at 5. However, it's always nice to have a little bit more, and then you can kind of play with the math a little bit. Every single time you roll down with Crew Quarters, you're going to heal 2. 1 on the first time you roll down, and then the second time before you roll back up the next turn. And this also allows you to not need to exhaust Miss Marvel, which you really don't want to be doing. You want to be using her to exhaust for the Morphogenics ability, pulling those cards back. So yes, she has an incredible recovery, but I would much rather be pulling back event cards 9 times out of 10. So Crew Quarters makes an excellent addition to almost any Miss Marvel deck. The last kind of thing that we'll talk about with any of the alter ego cards or cards that play into that are any of the cards that trigger on the flip. So like Lay Down the Law, Surprise Attack, any of those cards are going to be good for her deck, especially because she can kind of figure out when she's going to have that. Some of the hardest parts about playing those cards is you don't always have them at the right time. If you're already in hero form, you draw into Lay Down the Law, you're kind of out of luck. You're going to be using that as a resource. But if you're using a mirror to make sure that Lay Down the Law is on the bottom of your deck, and then you kind of play that in your, okay, if I stay up this turn, then I know that I will get Lay Down the Law for my flip up in 2 turns, then it gets significantly more playable. And so I always kind of look at those to try and add into the deck. The last 2 cards that I want to talk about are 2 cards that just go in almost every single one of my champions decks, and that's Moon Girl, who you can pay mental resources for, and for every mental resource you get to draw a card. Draw cards is always good. Moon Girl you can probably get on the table for 1 effective resource cost, which is her card herself, and then you have a 2 thwart, 2 attack, and then a block for 1 cost. I mean, that's incredible efficiency right there. Champions Mobile Bunker is also a really good card. Draw 2, discard 2 cards, and that just helps you find the tools that you need to be successful during your turn. And then, I guess I said 2 more. I'm going to throw 1 more in there. I apologize. Go for Champions is also a really good card if you're playing multiple players. The more I play Go for Champions in a solo game, I don't love it. It gets harder and harder for me to play. That 3 cost is pretty hefty for negating all damage in the round when there's only really 1 hero. And so you can run that if you're running an ally heavy champions deck, but what I've found is in single player, it doesn't get a lot of play for me. If you're running a multiplayer game, then yes, I would take a look at this, especially if you're running multiple champion decks, then this is definitely going to be something that you're going to look to throw in your deck. But in a solo game, I usually cut it, especially because we have such a great defense event with wiggle room. So let's dive into the aspects. So the way that I'm going to rank these aspects is they are going to be solo driven, and we're going to rank them in terms of strength. So the first one that I go into is going to be her weakest aspect, and moving into her strongest aspect. Once I get to the favorite aspect that I play with her, I will call that out so that we can talk about that a little bit. So the 4th place aspect that I have for her is leadership. So I don't really actually have a lot to say about leadership because she is so built around these attack, thwart, and defense events. It gets really hard to play blue. Blue doesn't have a ton of these. It has a lot of things that boost allies. That's kind of the core synergy with blue. And with that, we haven't seen a lot of these events that Miss Marvel can utilize Morphogenics to pull back. So it doesn't really work with her as well as it does a lot of the other heroes. In my game, I ran a strength in numbers build, which is you can exhaust any number of allies to draw that many cards, just to try and draw into some of her bigger cards like Sneak By or Big Hands, so that I can, get the tools that I need. And it wasn't super exciting. The other synergy that I found was Make the Call. Because of her Team Spirit ability, you discard cards from the top of your deck, and then you can pull in until you get to a Ms. Marvel card. If you're going to be running a leadership, you're probably going to be discarding allies, so Make the Call can pull some of those allies that you need from your discard pile into your hand. I don't really like blue. I don't think she's that great in blue. Actually, I don't think she's good in blue, especially compared to the other aspects. If you do have a blue deck though, please let me know in the comments. I really am excited to see how you all play her in blue, because I was not successful in doing so. Alrighty, so let's move on to the third aspect that she's best in. So I think number 3 is protection for her, and this is actually her precon. So she came with a precon, and she came with some incredible cards. So if you are on the fence of should I buy Ms. Marvel the hero pack, and you are trying to figure out, is her playstyle what I like, and if it does not seem to be that way, the pack has some incredible cards. So if not for Ms. Marvel, buy it for the aspect cards in her pack. They're really good. But for protection, Perfect Defense is so great, especially with Wiggle Room. You're going to be able to do so much damage mitigation with Wiggle Room. You pull it back, that's 6 damage that you have mitigated, and then you're up to 6 cards in your hand, right? So think about this. You're at 5 cards in hero form. You play Wiggle Room and you exhaust to pull it back. That draws you a card. You're up to 6 cards. If you are able to then have a perfect defend, maybe the villain only did 3 damage, or you had energy barriers or other cards out there that allowed you to not take any damage, then you could trigger Unflappable, and then you have a 7-card hand going into your turn. And that provides so much flexibility, especially in the protection aspect, because you then have any defense events left over for money that are probably going to be used to pay for her aspect cards, which are very solid. One of the newer additions to protection that I have really enjoyed with her is Flow Like Water. So Flow Like Water does 1 damage every single time you play a defense event, and with Wiggle Room you can trigger it twice, right? Because you can you don't even pay for it. It's a 0-cost card. You put it in your discard pile, pull it back, put it in, and each time you play it and negate the 3 damage drawing a card, you also get to deal damage. And so Flow Like Water is just a very solid synergistic card with her deck. Protection probably would be my favorite if it wasn't for a much more fun aspect that's coming up in the future. The next aspect that I think she is best in, her second best aspect, is aggression. So Embiggen and aggression are so much fun together. For a refresher, Embiggen is the card that increases the damage output by each attack, or by an attack, by 2. So if you can combo that with like a Hone Technique, damage can get absolutely bonkers. It's really fun. So multiple instances of damage with Hone Technique and Embiggen get so much fun. So 1 by 1, instead of becoming a 2 and 2 damage, it becomes a 2 to 4 with Embiggen, and then a 5 with 1 by 1. If you defeat a enemy, which at that point you're probably going to be able to kill almost any minion on the table, then you do get the additional 5. Or melee, which Hone Technique and melee love each other because that is a mental resource, so you can trigger the cost that you need to pay for Hone Technique. But that becomes it starts out as a 3 and 3. Embiggen takes it to a 5 and 5, and then whenever you throw a Hone Technique on it, it becomes an 8 and 8. So in true solo, 8 and 8, if you throw 8 damage at the villain for 3, you're looking at Swinging Web Kick, and then you get 8 free damage. It's really good. You can clear minions, you can clear the table, you can pull it back into your hand and play it again. Her action economy with the multiple instances of damage can get really good and really strong. I think she's incredible, and in aggression, she's really good at rushing the villain, she's really good at minion control, and then we don't talk a lot about multiplayer, but you can build her in either direction. You can build her as a minion clearer or as the main damage dealer of the party. Really, really solid aggression build. That brings us to her best aspect, which happens to also be my favorite aspect to play her in, and that is Justice. So Justice is so very synergistic with Ms. Marvel. It opens up all the threat mitigation you need to get full access from her awesome alter ego kit. So whenever you flip down, that villain is scheming. So Justice has access to Confuse, so the villain won't be scheming, or whenever you do flip up, threat's not going to be a problem if you're running Justice, especially with Ms. Marvel. She also loves One Way or Another's. So One Way or Another, you fish for a side scheme, reveal it, and then you get to draw 3 cards. So if you're flipping up and playing One Way or Another, I explained earlier how she can kind of flip up into like 7-card hand, 8-card hand based on the alter ego or if you've used team training or not. Then if you play One Way or Another, you go up to a 10-card hand. At that point, if you're running Justice and you've built your deck around it, you are going to be able to take care of that side scheme that you pull out. Combo that with the Skilled Investigator, that's another card draw. And then you can shrink almost any thwart event, shrink being her upgrade, and clear the side scheme. My favorite card to shrink is Clear the Area, because that is normally that's a 1 cost for 2 threat removal. When it is shrinked, it is a 1 cost for 4 threat removal, and if it clears it, you get to draw a card. In True Solo, 4 threat is probably going to clear more than 50% of the side schemes that are being brought out. And if it doesn't, then you can set it up that it will take it out. So either that's exhausting Ms. Marvel to clear the area back into your hand, and now you're paying 2 for 6 threat mitigation. Really good action economy there, and then you get to draw a card because 6 threat mitigation will take care of almost all. That I can think of very few side schemes that 6 threat removal would not take care of in a True Solo setting. The new card, last thing that I want to say about Ms. Marvel Justice is the new card Overwatch is awesome. Because Overwatch, you attach to a scheme and then you can respond after you take any threat off of a scheme. You can remove that same amount of threat from the attached scheme. This is great because it's effectively triggering shrink twice. So if you throw that on the main and then you take 6 off of a side scheme, maybe using a shrink, or 5 off of a side scheme, using a shrink on her sneak by card, then you can discard Overwatch and that's 5 off the main. Ms. Marvel is so incredibly fun. I think that she is a really strong hero. She's not the strongest hero. She does have some downsides. She doesn't have any way to induce status in her kit. She can be pretty reliant on flipping down. So if you have a high scheme villain, you can suffer in that sense. But she is one of the more fun heroes to play. I think in fun rankings, she is an S tier for me. Absolutely. I love playing Ms. Marvel. She is one of the heroes that took a while to build for me, and she does have a pretty steep learning curve. At least she did for me. Because you're not going to be using your basic powers to activate, right? You don't want to be threading for one or thwarting for one or attacking for one. You'd much rather be pulling a card back. So it's just kind of a little balance that you kind of have to work on with yourself when you are becoming a Ms. Marvel player. But once you do kind of get over that hurdle, the possibilities with her are endless. Overall, let's go ahead and rank her. So I'm going to put up the current ranking system here on the screen, and we're going to slide her in at an A tier right between Quicksilver and Nova. So she is a really strong hero. We've kind of talked about her strengths, a little bit about her weaknesses, and she deserves that A spot. Absolutely. I did put out a re-ranking video in between this Hero Spotlight and our previous Hero Spotlight, which was SPDR. If you have not seen that, that's maybe why this looks a little bit different than what it used to, but she may be moving up as we get more and more cards. When we get cards that do threat mitigation or damage potential that have multiple instances, that immediately becomes a contender for a spot in her deck. So that was Ms. Marvel. Who am I going to play next? So we are in the area where I do have 1 slot. I think I'm going to be able to get 1 Hero Spotlight in before X-Men drop. So vote for who I get to play next. That's going to be in the video description. I will pick whoever has the highest votes and play through them in all 4 aspects and make a video very similar to this, talking about them and putting them in the ranking. But then at the end of this month, which is September of 2022, we're getting X-Men. At that point, we're going to be dropping 4 X-Men heroes. I'm going to be doing a lot of hero spotlights. I'm going to be trying to do them back to back to back so that I can get you that information. We can see how they're played and then throw them into the ranking as well. Vote for who we get to play next before we get to see X-Men. I look forward to playing whoever you vote for. Make sure you like and follow so that you can see when those videos come out. And I appreciate you all. Go have some fun with Ms. Marvel.